Hey, hi, and welcome back to Scholastically Natalie. If you are interested in hearing me interpret some more academically inclined books or just talk about some other general books, perhaps even book reviews, or if you're interested in D&D, feel free to subscribe. I'm also going to be talking about writing sometime soon, but I'm just very excited because I have a desk now and therefore can continue to talk about books. So, on the book I'm definitely going to start talking about, it's going to get probably quite a few videos on it because I've only read a little bit of it and it's been written on every single page. Yes, I may be a book maniac, but I write all over my books if I own them because I learned to do that in college and it's honestly a wonderful experience. It's great. I love it. So I want to talk with you about A Vindication of the Rights of Woman by Mary Wollstonecraft. If you don't know, this is generally considered like the OG text of feminism. I'm interested in reading it and honestly comparing it to the wave of feminism that we are on now. I have listened to, some more modern feminist literature, and I'm honestly very interested in reading this old type of text. Also, I love reading older books. I love that style of writing. I love phrasing. I love everything to do with it. Hi, I'm a giant book nerd. So I am more than happy to talk about that with you. Okay, so we will just be doing the introduction today because I'd like to give you a glimpse of kind of what this book's going to be about. I do know that there's a little bit about Mary Wollstonecraft's past and like her life in this. She was honestly a really cool lady. So if you're already here, you're already interested. I don't know why I was about to say if you're interested, please listen further. If you didn't know, she is in fact the mother of Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. So if you're interested in hearing a little bit more about her, that'd be great too. So, Mary Wollstonecraft was born in London on the 27th of April, 1759, to a comfortably middle-class family. Throughout her childhood, the family finances deteriorated to such an extent that her father forced her to turn over the money she was due to inherit when she came of age. Two friends helped her through her young life, Jane Arden and Fanny Blood. With the former, she would read books and attend lectures given by Arden's father, who saw himself as a philosopher and scientist. At the first opportunity, Wollstonecraft left her home in 1778 and took a job as a lady's companion in Bath. If you are familiar with Bath, it is mentioned in, the Canterbury Tales. There we go. I just forgot. By the character who came from Bath called the Wife of Bath. But in 1780, she was forced to return home to care for her dying mother. Rather than returning to Bath, Mary instead turned to the Blood family and lived with them. Her friendship with Fanny blossomed, and the two planned to rent rooms together. They set up a school in Newington Green, but Blood died in 1785 to Wollstonecraft's dismay. Mary Wollstonecraft lived an unconventional life for an 18th century woman. After spending a year as a governess, she turned to writing, an unusual choice, because in that time period, writing was viewed as something a man should be doing, because I'm pretty sure it was at least considered that women couldn't quite figure out how to write a cohesive narrative or something along that sort. Her first novel, Mary, a fiction, was published in 1788. She made contact with the publisher Joseph Johnson, who introduced her to a number of radical figures in the arts and politics, including the famous Thomas Paine. If you haven't heard of Thomas Paine, he wrote Common Sense. Despite her efforts, a relationship with the married artist Henry Fuseli, whom she met at one of Johnson's meetings, came to naught. Wollstonecraft moved to France, where she penned A Vindication of the Rights of Man in 1790 in response to Edmund Burke's conservative classic, Reflections on the Revolution in France. It brought her an almost immediate notoriety. Perhaps more important was the platform it provided for her most significant work, A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. In this pamphlet, perhaps the earliest work of feminist literature, she called for women to hold equal rights to men. In particular, Wollstonecraft argued that rather than being viewed as men's property, women were just as deserving of rights as their male counterparts. So essentially, this was the point in time in which, women still didn't have rights, especially this because Wollstonecraft was in England, even before we reached America at this point. They were just wives and existed in the background and had no political or social meaning whatsoever, pretty much. And so at this point, Wollstonecraft was really radical and honestly probably horrifying to most of society for even suggesting this. Empowering women through education would benefit all of society, not just men. So she's trying to argue that even though we may be in a male-dominated society, the men who dominate that society could still benefit by giving women equal rights. And she writes a lot about how that would happen. And crucially, the education given to women should not be focused on domestic activities, but like men, women should be free to study science, literature, and politics, and, as adults, pursue a career of their own choosing. It's interesting to me because you can still see some, like, really faint echoes, like, even in today's society about what she's arguing about, because we still have jobs that are predominantly focused towards one gender or another, and so, like, we're still kind of trapped in vague social roles that society continues to enforce. I just find it interesting. Oh, and then we have a timeline. In France, Mary fell in love with the American adventurer Gilbert Imlay and gave birth to her first child, Fanny, but she returned to London in April 1795 after Imlay left her. Wollstonecraft unsuccessfully attempted to commit suicide in May of the same year and gradually returned to her literary career. Eventually, in March 1997, she would marry for the first time to the philosopher William Godwin. It seemed that Mary had finally achieved happiness. On the 30th of August, 1797, she gave birth to her daughter, Mary Shelley, who had become an author in her own right. However, Wollstonecraft's happiness was short-lived, and she died from septicemia on 10th September 1797. Mary Wollstonecraft's legacy was a mixed one. A year after her death, her husband published the memoirs of the author of A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. Unintentionally, he tarnished her reputation beyond repair. He described her love affairs, her suicide attempts, and her skepticism of religion, all of which condemned her in the eyes of the 19th century society. Basically, during the 19th century, definitely all of which he revealed about her life, including her having an affair with a married man, and especially her attempting suicide at one point, and how she didn't really like religion. I know that definitely back then it was still viewed that religion would send you to hell. Not religion. Suicide would send you to hell if you committed it, and that, of course, having an affair with a married man was one of the worst things you could do. So he definitely pretty much ruined her for quite a while. It was not until the late 19th century, with the rise of the suffragette movement in the United Kingdom, that her work was taken seriously again. Her groundbreaking work was ahead of its time. In the 20th century, her writings, rather than her unconventional personal life, would take center stage. So that's just the introduction, giving a vague summary of Mary Wollstonecraft. So, in 1970, she published A Vindication of the Rights of Man in response to Edmund Burke. In 1792, she published A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, obviously inspired by her response to Edmund Burke. And in 1795, she attempts suicide and fails. And then in 1797, she marries William Godwin and has Mary Shelley. And then in that same year, she ends up dying. So she lived a rather... Like, imagine that. In 7 years, she does all this crazy stuff. But yes, she's definitely a very interesting lady. So, I hope you got something from the introduction, at least. You're going to see kind of just what we're going to be talking about, which is definitely a vindication of the rights of women. So next up is to M. Talleyrand Perigord, late Bishop of Audun. I'm not entirely sure, but I am fairly certain that, yes, she's replying to something he published on national education. So just to give you kind of like a glimpse at what we understand, what we will be reading so that you know. So here's like the first opening sentence. Sir, Having read with great pleasure a pamphlet which you have lately published on national education, I dedicate this volume to you, the first dedication that I have ever written, to induce you to read it with attention, and because I think that you will understand me, which I do not suppose many pert witlings will, who may ridicule the arguments they are unable to answer. Okay, so that's the first sentence. And while this is not, like, super long, because, of course, it is a letter, it's only 3 pages, that is the type of writing we are going to be reading when we're looking at this. So, if you're interested, subscribe, turn on those wonderful notifications to see when I next upload, and I hope that you will be as excited to read this book as I am. It is so covered in writing. I need to take some pictures so that I can show you guys. I'm excited to do this series. Anyways, I will stop talking and leave it at that. Okay, Scholastically Natalie, out.